when Conor McGregor and Khabib's great fight was going on. So my friend just told me, "Hey, I'm gonna watch the fight. Are you gonna watch it today?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? Which fight?" How I look at MMA is that you don't have to really compete or be a professional fighter to be a martial artist. It really teaches you the way of life. I was going to another competition when I was 16 and I met the president of IMMAF, Sharif Babu. I was there to go fight the senior girls. So they were like, "No, you cannot fight. You're 16." When you turn into a professional fighter, that's where these big leagues like UFC or One Championship or Brave, they all come into play.
You were trying to really carve out a small tunnel for your own MMA journey, and somehow this passion of yours ended up creating an entire highway.
CombatU is the first ever martial arts program in the world, which provides a pathway and joins your education to mixed martial arts, right?
MMA will make its debut in the Asian Games in 2026.
I cannot wait when MMA is going to be an Olympic sport. I really think it's going to be soon.
Hi, and welcome to Raising an Athlete, Aranjot.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to share with my audience, as our guest, we have someone who I've been trying to bring on this podcast for months. The first time I read the story about this young woman from India, the dream that she had to pursue MMA and how she ended up contributing to a larger journey where a university in US has actually introduced MMA on its syllabus. I think it's such a brilliant story for all young athletes in general, but definitely those aspiring for a career pathway in combat sports. I'm really thrilled to have you here, Aranjot.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction and all you do for our youth. I'm really honored to be here to talk about my journey.
Thank you. So, Aranjot, I feel that outside the circle of, the diehard fans who love MMA, many in India may not understand what it is. And through this conversation, I do hope to speak about your journey, but also kind of spotlight the sport a bit and talk about potential pathways for more young girls and boys who may want to pursue it. So, before we speak about your journey, if you could share for someone who's completely new to mixed martial arts, how would you explain what MMA actually is?
So MMA is a product of all the martial arts combined together. So I would say wrestling, boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, all those disciplines, when they come together, that is MMA. So it comprises of stand-up game and a ground game.
And can you share briefly the history of MMA's global rise? I mean, what were the key moments, or who were the stars, and what really made the world sit up and take notice of this?
I would say it all started way back, I would say, with jiu-jitsu when the Gracie family started it, and then with the UFC when that was brought up. And I know that the Gracie family has been really instrumental in that history. In India, I would say it's still a rising sport, and where we recently had our first female fighter, first ever fighter from the US, Pooja Tomar, win on the UFC stage. So starting from way back from other countries like US, Brazil, where it was a really buzzing sport, to now India also being on a map with Anshul Jubli and Pooja Tomar. It's now a sensation in our country as well.
What is it about the sport that, I mean, for those who follow it, it's almost addictive to watch the sport. What is it that appeals to the viewers in your mind?
I would say MMA is such a beautiful sport that it has strength in it. It really inspires you to be a better human being. How I look at MMA is in a way that you don't have to really compete or be a professional fighter to be a martial artist. It really teaches you the way of life, which is discipline, or really waking up in the morning and pushing through your excuses and really being there on the mat. So for me, if I was to tell anyone why you should do MMA, is because it would teach you the way of life. And that's why I have been part of doing MMA for over 7 years now, started from basketball, transitioned into MMA. And the reason I keep on doing it every day, even pushing through injuries, is because I love being in the sport. It teaches you resilience. It really pushes you to look deep inside of what really drives you to do this. And mental resilience is a part of it. Psychology is the main part of martial arts. You can physically do all you want to do and train every day on the mats. But the main puzzle piece, the main mantra is having your physical strength involved. and that really takes you way beyond in the sport.
Help me understand this, Aranjot. And I mean, in India, I think at grassroots, at some level, some of the different martial arts, we also have a rich tradition as a country of our own martial arts. And in the playgrounds, you would see young children, they're learning, let's say, taekwondo or judo. How do you pick one form over the other? Is it about access, or compared to MA, how does that really work?
Wow, that's a really wonderful question because I know most of the fighters that I knew in India typically did wrestling or boxing or kickboxing or, as you said, taekwondo, and then down the road they transitioned into MMA. But my path was different. When I started, I started completely with mixed martial arts. So I used to do basketball, and my first class I went to the MMA gym, and I started doing all the disciplines together from day one when I started it. I think I started when I was 14 years old. I'm 20 now. So I would do, say, boxing in the morning or grappling in the evening, wrestling in the afternoon. So from my experience, what's really helped me is taking all those disciplines together if you really have the goal of doing MMA. But then, as all paths are different, I've seen people who really are proficient in certain martial arts, say wrestling, and they have a career in that. And down the road, they really find MMA interesting and they change their style and also run different styles to get there. So I see different kind of learning pathways in both aspects of it. You might have to unlearn some of the things if you're transitioning from one sport to MMA. Whereas in MMA, you kind of like are in the mindset of really being in the cage to do that sport. So that's kind of like the analysis of how you start. It comes down to at what point of life do you discover MMA? And in both sides, you're going to come to the same conclusion. So it's from people to people and your access, as you said, the access to what's around you and the exposure you get for martial arts from early on.
Right. So I think we'll speak about pathways, and you made a very beautiful point that there can be different entry points for different people. But before we get into pathways, again, a little about your own journey. So please do share what sparked your own interest in MMA.
So it was, I guess, when Conor McGregor and Khabib's great fight was going on. So my friend just told me, "Hey, I'm gonna watch the fight. Are you gonna watch it today?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? Which fight?" That was my first exposure to just going to YouTube and searching it up. And I was really endorsed in basketball at that time for 7 years in the national team, training morning and night. I was really, really my school team being the captain. That took a lot of my time. But when I saw those videos on YouTube and I kept on binge watching it, is when I really felt, I think I want to try it. So that's what really ignited the spark. And I went to my mother the next day. I think I showed her the video of Ronda Rousey. And I was like, "Hey, mom, I want to do this." And she just looked at me funny. That's just another day. She's coming with another thing. But my parents they never stop me from anything. They really, whatever I want to do, they stand there like a backbone and help me with that. So when they saw that I was coming again, they just asked me to go search for a gym and go for a trial. So that's kind of how my journey began. And then it's been ever since. Now we're here still doing it.
Lovely. So how was your experience when you tried it out?
Wow, the first day, I think we were doing stand up, and I think it was Krav Maga based and more self defense based seminar. And my parents were sitting outside and looking good. And the taboo in India that females train with females, males train with female. But my entire life, I think 95% of my partners have been males. So when I was in that class, I was training. And then for me, it was really fascinating. And for some reason, it didn't feel like something completely new to my body. I don't know how that correlated to my basketball and being an athlete my entire life. It was really natural learning it from day one. But I remember after that first class, after that experience, I loved it. I went out and my mom was like, "Okay, so are we done?" I was like, "No, I'm doing this." And she told my dad, "We should get her a 1 month membership." And dad was like, "No." I know she's staying. I'm gonna get a 6 month. That was my first initial experience starting it. I remember I started with training once a day. So I would train in the morning before my school, go to the gym at 5:30, 6 a.m., and at 8 a.m. I would go straight to my school. Did that for quite a while, and then during COVID was when I started training twice a day, thrice a day. That was the initial experience.
So the art really spoke to you for you at such a young age to put all your time, energy, waking up early into that. Do share a little about your family and your early childhood. What were your growing years in Punjab? You grew up in,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
and what were your early influences?
Oh, wow, my so early, I would say I've done everything when I was a kid. So I was 4 when I started learning kirtan, so I used to do singing, and I was 6 when I started doing classical Indian dance and all contemporary, all sorts of dances, and I would do a lot of public speaking. I would do swimming, I tried skating, I tried basketball. And then when I was 9 years old, when I started doing basketball, and then I loved it, and that's when I did that consistently for 7 years all throughout when I was cool. So I would say my early years were really a mix of trying all different skills, not just sports, but being a well-rounded individual. So I remember my days used to be full from early on. Sometimes I'm starting yoga at 5 a.m. when I was a little kid with my mom, and then going to school, coming back straight to my dance class, and then straight to my sports class, straight to my speaking class, and I would come back at night to my singing class, you know? So the work ethic was always instilled since I was a little kid from my mother. So that was really instrumental and really translated to today and even doing martial arts, that it wasn't something new that, oh, I have to wake up early in the morning. Oh my God, that's a shock. So I was just used to that work ethic since I was a kid. And that was the reason I say that wasn't really a shock doing MMA, because I was an athlete my
Yeah.
entire childhood. So that really translated to the future and even now. It's, you know, how you set up the foundation when you are young and you carry that forward forever in your life. It's never a shock when you're trying new things. So I give all the credits to my upbringing that was done by my mother and my family when I was young.
You make a great point about habits, because I think we get into a automatic mode with our habits and routines, and then it's not, hard work that you're trying to do in that sense, because you already have positive routines in your life. Speak to us a little about that ethic that you spoke about, that discipline. Was that something innate? Was that something coming from your parents? The waking up early, you spoke about kirtan, did that play a role? Just kind of curious to know how that set in for you, or what role did your mom or parents play in this?
I would say that was all also from how I was being taught and also looking at my family. Like my mother, she completed her fashion design degree after having me. So when I was in school, at the same time, she was completing her fashion designing degree, right? So I saw her taking me to all those classes, but also sitting at nights completing her homework. We both used to do our work together. So all those class she would go to my dance classes with me. All the morning classes, she would go there with me. When I was doing martial arts, I started when I was 14. For like 2 years, she used to drive me at 5 a.m., stay there for 2 hours in the car while I used to train, and then take me to school. So the entire day while I did that, she was there with me. And then along with it, I would say my grandparents too. My grandfather, he wakes up at 2 a.m. every day and he does his prayers. So he's Amritari, so he wakes up at 2 a.m., does all his prayers. And even though he's sick, he slept late, we're at a wedding, he's waking up at 2 a.m. And then he's gonna go on his walk, gonna go do yoga, his meditation, breathing. So they never really forced me to be
Hmm.
disciplined,
Right.
but they set those examples, right? And I wanted to do it. I looked at him, I was like, hey, I want to go to running at 5:32, right? I still remember that I was known for I could never sit still. So if I was on my bed or watching TV, I would be drawing along with it. So that work ethic became so natural since I was a kid that I never had to even think about forcing that. So all those things really shaped into being now. And I remember that I had a set schedule. This is the time where you have to be here, here, and here. And I had no phone. But I did have that kind of drive that if my mom said I have to be home at 8 p.m., I'll be home at 55. So that's kind of like the built-in habit and routine that comes now. And even while I'm talking, my grandfather still wakes up at 2 a.m. no matter what. And that translates. He was in the army and he's a lawyer now, so he always led by example. My grandfather's discipline has always been a great instrumental in my life.
I think it's a very, very important point because we speak about environment and positive environment, but what does that environment really look like? It's not always about infrastructure or, fancy equipment or things. It's about the spirit and the role modeling, the influences that you have, the people you have around you. And I think, yes, that as in your early childhood, I think it's your family, it's your parents, grandparents who are such a influence. Thanks for sharing that. Can you share a little about some of the early competitions that you entered and how did you even come to know about these competitions and really your experience on the way to becoming a national champion?
My first competition was a grappling championship when I was 14 years old. That was my first exposure. I won a gold. And then after that, my first MMA fight was when I was 16 years old. So that's when I did my debut fighting, and I had 2 bouts back to back. I won both those, making my record 2-0. Now this is going to be a interesting story. I was going to another competition when I was 16, and I met the president of IMMAF, Sharif Babu, and he wouldn't let me fight because I wasn't 18. I was there to go fight the senior girls. So they were like, "No, you cannot fight. You're 16 and there were no youth girls." That's where they really introduced me to IMMAF, and they really invited me to try out the IMMAF Youth Championships while I was 16. So after that, when I won that championship when I was 16, I could not fight the next one because of IMMAF and Sir Sharif Sir really stepping in. The following year, I got the invitation to represent India in the Youth World Championship. So that's where I went with the IMF team to Dubai. So we went to Abu Dhabi. I represented India there. So I had 3 bouts. I placed fourth in the roster at that time. I went to the World Championship. And after I came back, I had Ava from Dubai. She started an academy in India, and we had a coach from Colombia teach. So Professor Mauricio, that's when I started training with them after an injury. And there was the announcement for the national championship. So in 2023, I would say in January, I had a 3-month camp with them. I went to the national championship in Lucknow, became the national championship. At that time, too, I was a junior. I was 18, and there were no girls in my roster. So I challenged the senior girls to fight them. I won that championship. After I came back, I got an invitation from Atrixion in Dubai to come there and represent them in the Jiu-Jitsu International in Abu Dhabi. So in the AJP tour. So I went there, I had a camp there for a month, and then I got a bronze. That was my first jiu-jitsu competition. And then after that, came back, and that was time to wrap up and come to the United States. So that was kind of like leading up to my journey to coming here. All these competitions were the ones that I took part in.
Right. So initially, when you started, did you have a coach or where were you training? And then you spoke about this academy. Where was this academy where you trained in India?
So I would say I started with Kings Academy. So I was training with Suraj Kabir Verma for a while. And then after that, I trained with Atrixion. So these were the 2 gyms that I
Right.
trained in Chandigarh.
Okay. So, a friend who I mentioned that I'm going to be speaking with you asked me a question to say, is MMA an actual sport? And that makes me ask a question of, do we actually have a federation in India for MMA? And do we have clear pathways for any young fighter who's trying to, transition at different levels?
In India, I guess we have multiple federations. I know IMF is the one that I've been a part of and I've been really grateful. When I was in India, I trained with them, and I think there's Gamma championships too. So we have all these pathways that you can be a part of. In IMF, I can speak for IMF, where you get the national championships, and then you can go to Asian championships as well as world championships. And I know from the United States too, where I train, and the gyms around, they send the team from the USA. So that is the federation that I know is very well versed, and they really have those students go out to those big championships and really take the team every time. I just saw a post that they have their Asian championship in a few days. So that's really a great place for amateurs to have an experience because they really have youth world championships where there's more rules to really protect the fighters, really not have punches to the face. It's more kicks and I would say jiu-jitsu. And then there's junior for 18 to 20, and then over 20 is the senior. So kind of like you have a pathway of exposure from being an amateur to becoming a professional fighter. So these are kind of like the federations that I can talk about.
When you started off, you spoke about the few domestic and international ones. What was the kind of competition that you saw, the level of competition that you saw, and where were the different players in India coming from? Like, are there any specific geographies where, MMA is more popular within India? Players were coming. Your own experience as a girl, but also you can share for boys as well. That where is the ecosystem?
I would say in my journey, starting when I was 14 to right before coming, I have seen a great kind of like growth in MMA just in the span of this time. When I started, there were barely any females in competitions, like no females in the gym. I'm the only one most of the times. But with time, I saw more females getting that exposure coming to the gym and even in competitions. So I would say in India, in IMMAF, we would have people from many, many states. We would have Punjab, we would have Jammu and Kashmir, we would have Hyderabad, we would have Tamil Nadu, we would also have Mumbai. So mostly all of the states, kind of Chhattisgarh, were participating in those competitions, but the level of engagement, I would still say it's a really male dominated sport. So the females who are really participating, it's a really low number of involvement. But I think it's really growing. It's ever growing. And now if we look back, we have more females participating and taking that step forward. And it all comes from really the exposure and believing that there's a future in it. And I know now after having representation in the UFC, more and more Indian population is knowing about it. And that support is really important. If an athlete wants to do and invest so many hours into a support, they want the return to investment. They do want to see that, yes, they're going to get somewhere in the future and they have the support for it. And I really like how we're getting there. I know that for Anshul Jubli, his gym is in Delhi. I think Coach Siddharth said, yeah, he's from Delhi. And then it's the demographic that is spread in India is a lot now. And I'm really proud of how we are really growing. We're getting more representation in jiu-jitsu. We hosted AJP Tour recently, which was amazing.
So you mentioned IMF and you also mentioned UFC. Can you talk a little about some of these global MMA platforms for those who may not be very familiar?
So IMMAF is an amateur fighting league where you go in, you have shin pads, you have little protection, your gloves have more padding, so you're more protected, and the referee would interfere earlier if there's blood, or you're not allowed to throw elbows or knees. So you're really fighting with some restrictions to make sure that you're in your early development stages. And then after that, when you turn into a professional fighter, that's where these big leagues like UFC or One Championship or Brave, they all come into play. And then you have a record which you have to maintain. Your record is being looked at. Your record is something that really gets you into other leagues and your fighting style, So those are like the two different platforms of how an athlete really goes through their journey. Being an amateur is really a good time to have that experience, learn, make mistakes, a lot of mistakes, and your record is not really being scrutinized that much. And then when you turn a professional is when you might have a manager. You might be looking at more also the business side of it, also the playing field of it. Which fighter are you fighting? And then which, I would say, federations or organizations you're fighting with. With UFC is one of the most decorated organizations, which is run by Dana White. So my coach here in the United States, he's UFC Hall of Famer. So really surrounded by UFC fighters at my gym. So those are the main federation differences.
Lovely. A question that I missed asking you earlier was about your coach. Can you share a little bit about why he's considered one of the most important figures in MMA and a little about training with him?
So Uriah Faber is one of the most humble, down to earth people, athletes that I've seen in my entire journey. He was the one because of whom his kind of like used to train outside when there was no fights or his weight category wasn't there. And then when he came in and he fought in the UFC, made waves. Like Dominic Cruz and his fights were really the trend at that time and became the UFC Hall of Famer. He started his Academy, Ultimate Fitness, started his team Alpha to train the next generation. And he's been training for years and years from 2000s. Now at the gym, it's called his Team Alpha. It's now in the UFC. He goes most of the weekends to go teach, corner them in the fights. And then he's always on the mat every day. So whenever we have our pro trainings in the morning, he's always there Monday through Friday. He teaches jiu-jitsu in the evenings. So he's really active. He trains with us. It's not like he's just coaching. He trains, steps on the mats with us and competes. He has businesses that he runs along with that. How he walks, talks, treats people is with kindness. No matter whoever's coming to his gym, or they know or they don't know martial arts, he treats everyone the same way. And, it's really rare to see someone who has done so much in life be so down to earth and lend that hand. He was the first, so when I did my first competition here in jiu-jitsu, and it was expensive, and I was like, how am I going to pay for it? He paid for my tournament fee, right? It was just first few months that he was there. I was like, I'll pay for it, right? So he's just, I would say, a godsend person for the sport of martial arts and in general for the community.
And something that he says in training that stays with you, or a message from him that's kind of important to you.
This is gonna be funny for many people. He says be delusional. Why he says that is that no matter if people are trying to tell you that you don't have it or anything, your brain should always be like, I'm the champion already, right? So he says that when he was in the early stages, if someone would say, hey, would you do this? A big thing. Are you gonna be this in the future? I would say yes, even if I didn't know I would do it. No was never an answer for him too. So be delusional. I would say the world really looks at it as something negative, but the way he explains it to us makes so much sense that before people can see who you really are or where you can really be, you should be able to look at it yourself. You should be able to tell you that, hey, I'm the champion, even if no one's believing in you. So have that delusion in your mind that you're the best.
No, it's beautiful a message, because I think a lot of limits, and we know this, that are limits that we put ahead of us. It's not about the limits that actually exist. So if we can convince ourselves, then I think, yeah, the battle is won. When you imagine, Aranjot, the next 5-7 years of your career, what is the dream you're building towards, and what are the steps you're taking right now to make that dream real?
Wow. So that's a really good question. So I'm an amateur right now, so I wish to have more fights under my belt in amateur and work my way towards becoming a professional. So that's my MMA career that I want to keep working on and really see CombatU grow. And while I'm on my journey, see other athletes all around the world really be on that journey themselves. And along with that, I'm in business. So me and my mom, we have a fashion brand in India called Aranik. So I want to grow her business and be a businesswoman myself, be an entrepreneur. I always have wanted to do business. So it's going to be both my pathways going forward, complementing each other while I go look ahead on my next few years.
I want to get to the one of what I find the most exciting parts of your story is your journey to US. As when you were looking to moving to US to study, and you wrote to the Sacramento University, what were your thoughts? Can you walk us through how the choice came together for you?
Of course. So when I wanted to come to the United States, I really wanted to come and do martial arts since MMA is still a rising sport and I wanted to have more exposure and training. So I had a list of gyms in the United States, the best gyms in the United States. And I've always believed that education is really crucial in your journey, no matter what. And that was always my mom's concern, or she would always say that whatever you want to do in life, make sure that you're completing your education. So when I was looking for those gyms, I had a list, and my second thing was looking at universities around those gyms. So any university that would be beyond 10 miles, I would cut it off the list. When I came to Sacramento State, it was just 1 mile. So Uriah Faber's gym, Ultimate Fitness, was just 1 mile from Sac State. So this was the only university I applied to. So coming to your other question, how I kind of reached out to Sac State was when I applied, it's really hard for someone coming from India to really pay for an education in the United States, which is really 3 times the domestic people pay abroad. So when that happened, I was looking for opportunities to really use my resume to get scholarships and look for opportunities. And the answers were no, because MMA is not an NCAA sport or it's not recognized in education. When that happened, I did that over the summer. I was reaching out to athletics at Sac State, and I was not getting the answers I wanted. Around 1 month before coming, I saw that Sac State had a new president. So Dr. Luke Wood got appointed as the president of California State University, Sacramento. And after I saw my coach Uriah post a story of Dr. Wood boxing in our gym, he's a boxer. So when I saw his video, that's where I connected that, okay, he's a martial artist too. So I just reached out to him on Instagram that, hey, I'm coming from India and I'm looking for opportunities and scholarships, and there's nothing for martial arts. That's where the dialogue began. So after I came to the United States, he already kind of like had it in his brain. He was thinking of ways and the talks of having a mixed martial arts program in the university started. And that was like the building block for having CombatU. That was the early stages.
Right. Right. We will get into CombatU also, but before that, so what I want to ask is, I'm just curious to know, without that state support, without the scholarship, if you were a young student who's looking to study over there, and also I'm sure the gym costs would have, if it's a UFC Hall of Fame athlete, fighter who's running it, the costs would be substantial over there. Do you think, were you ready or were you prepared without scholarship? Did you have the support to be able to do that, to pursue the education as well as, be a part of the gym training?
I would say I just came with faith. I did not even think about not figuring out a way, right? So no way that I would have my family support and sustain 4 years and also all the costs that are associated with it. I did have my parents who kind of were there to really help me however much they can, but I knew that I had to do that to really sustain being in the United States. So when I came, I didn't have a second thought that it was not going to work out. So from India, I was constantly applying for scholarships, constantly looking for more opportunities. And that comes from that tunnel vision that I'm going to do it, right? It never crossed my mind, what if I don't get a scholarship? What if I don't find a way out, right? Even after coming, it was not like given to me on a plate that, hey, here's your scholarship, take it. I had to really come and be engaged on campus and really take that step myself to do it. You know, when at the end it comes down to if you really have a vision and you want to do it, you would find a way. Rest all is excuses. Students come here with a goal, and then you have to really put in the work to get that return out of those opportunities. So for me, it was, in one word, I would tell you, faith really drove me here to come here.
And I think I read somewhere about you, or maybe that's how you described yourself, that I don't take no for an answer. And I think that really shows in your journey, because like you said, that literally, there was no plan B for you in that sense, where you were really working. And I think that mental attitude is also so very important, just that positivity or just that faith, like you said, with which you were operating. But this is my favorite part of the story, where I find most incredible is that you were trying to really carve out a small tunnel for your own MMA journey, and somehow this passion of yours ended up creating an entire highway, a path. So many young girls and boys in US, I mean, CombatU, now a landmark program. Just please do speak about that.
So, CombatU is the first ever martial arts program in the world, which provides a pathway and joins your education to mixed martial arts, right? So now we have 5 clubs which are housed under CombatU, which is boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and MMA, and it's a public-private partnership between our public university and Uriah Faber's gym and other gyms, which is Flawless. So it kind of just began with uh, a DM to the president. And when I came to the United States, and I remember on my orientation day, when I was sitting in the audience, the president, after giving his speech, he came down, and instead of going right out, he took a right and he stood next to me and he was like, "You were that martial arts girl, right?" And he was like, "I'm working on finding a way out." So the president was on it. It was his first, he just started at the same time, but he was so passionate about doing something that I remember that few days after, I was in Zoom meetings talking to people about, hey, how can we bring martial arts to Sac State, or how can we make something out of it? In one semester. So I came in 2023 fall. In spring 2024 is when we announced that Sac State is building CombatU. We had our main press launch in 2024 spring, and in fall 2024 is when we started the program. We had two big facilities on campus, one for ground game and one for kickboxing and boxing, housed in our athletics. And in no time, we had over 500 athletes enrolled. And in 1 year, I became the president of two clubs, which was MMA and Jiu-Jitsu. So I've been president of that. I was the ambassador of CombatU in its initial stages. I did marketing and help in building it up for 2 years. And now we have over 500 students enrolled. We have national champions. We have two national champions in wrestling. We have All-Americans in boxing. We just won the first ever Jiu-Jitsu national championship for the team. We have fight nights on campus. So we have MMA fights on campus. And then we also had our Causeway Boxing Classic on campus. So that's just the program in a nutshell. And I'm so proud of it, how far we have come in just 2 years. And it all started with a vision and having a visionary leader on campus like Dr. Wood and Uriah Faber wanting to take that step forward for this generation, because we are the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's so incredible, but also, a dream of a young person to be there. And I think all the people coming together. So you're also known as the student founder of CombatU, and you mentioned you serve as the president for MMA and Jiu-Jitsu. What does this role involve, and what is the criteria for applicants who apply for this program? I mean, how does a young fighter from India apply to this program?
So for my role, since as the student founder, I was instrumental in the building of the program alongside our leadership on campus. So the student voice was heard when the program was being built and how we did the marketing. So I was doing marketing for MMA even before CombatU was announced. So sharing my journey on campus and having that early buzz around MMA. And then after it was launched, I was also part of the marketing for the program and really covering all of those clubs. And that's where I say that we bridge the gap between education and combat sports. Because if I'm a business major and I'm getting experience doing marketing for these clubs, right? So that's how we really serve our student body. And you have to have a certain GPA to be part of the clubs. That answers your other question, how can someone join it? There's no criteria to join it. You just have to be accepted to Sac State. So you apply to Sac State. If you get in, all the trainings are free of cost for students. You don't have to pay to be part of any club, and you're getting trained by UFC fighters. You're getting trained by people who train UFC fighters, right? All of our coaches have really, really long lasting and great careers, and they're teaching you there. And then you have Uriah Faber's A1 Combat, which really helps throw those shows. So if you apply to Sac State as an international student and you get in, you'll be able to train there. And then from there, it's on you how far you want to go, how much involved do you want to be, because we don't have the criteria that you have to fight. If you're part of CombatU, you can be a part of it and not fight. And if you have to take that step forward, you can really compete. And it's not also like you have to stick to one club. I train across all five clubs because, as I said in the beginning, MMA has all those disciplines as part of it. So that's how we provide that cross-sectionality between those clubs, that you can do MMA, but while you're doing MMA, you can work on all these different disciplines that translate into being an MMA fighter. Or if you want to be an Olympian in boxing. You have the boxing club, right? We just have our team in New York today, which is competing. You can go compete wherever you want and have a journey while also completing your education. And you have a chance to win a scholarship as well. And we have had students come from Hawaii. So we had Baba, who came from Hawaii on a full scholarship, and he became our first fighter to win an MMA fight on our amateur card. We had a female fighter come from Azerbaijan. I was the first international student from India. So we have all these things. And how it really translates into your overall journey is that you can be a fighter, but along with that, you study. Me, I ran for being a student body president of the entire university. So I ran for that. That doesn't stop you anywhere. So that's the holistic view of how CombatU really works.
You mentioned that for anyone who wants to get into the program, they don't necessarily have to have a background, but does it help for someone to have an athletic or sport background when they're applying to the university?
That, of course, that helps. Then you're straight up ready to go compete. But we also have students who really started just with CombatU and just won championships in 1 year. So it doesn't restrict you at all, whichever part of the journey you are in. We have students who just applied from different states just because they wanted to start martial arts, train. And we had a student who won an amateur MMA bout, and they had just been training with us 1 year. So it's really flexible how you're applying. If you're coming as like a decorated athlete who has had a journey, it of course is like an addition to your own journey. But in CombatU, we're not really looking at you any different. If you're coming as a completely new fighter, you're going to get the same resources, you're going to get the same help. And one thing I would really want to help is that really sets this apart. When you come here and you get insurance, you take your insurance in the United States and you apply with it. Along with it, because of being part of club sports, the university has secondary insurance. So if your insurance doesn't cover something, you have secondary insurance to take care of you. Along with that, you have physical therapists on campus who are helping you out for free. And then for concussion or getting checked from our well on campus, which is where you go for your health and services, you can go get that. And if you really want to work on your mental strength or really want that aspect of it, you have psychologists for free, right? So it's not just training, not just education. You have access to all these things along with it, you know? You're not paying for your training. You're not paying for getting your physiotherapy every day. You're not paying to get diagnosed. You're not paying to get your concussion testing done. So that is a power package for me. Like that takes so many resources out.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes your, one is about resources and it takes your mind away from all, the limiting factors and actually put your best energy behind what you actually have kind of intended to do. So, Aranjot, we'll just shift a little bit now and speak about pathways in MMA, starting with what age can a person formally start training in MMA? So this segment is for any young fighters or sports parents who might be interested or intrigued by this. What is the age at what one gets started?
I would say they can start as soon as they start walking. So when I had my first coach and in his house, I would say his son was 4 years old. He was doing taekwondo. And now there's jiu-jitsu where kids start when they're 5, 6, 7, and they work all the way. And then there's prodigies by the time they're 14. So there's no age limit. I started at 14. There's people who start at 20 and become world champions by 30. There's people who start at 30. There are people who start at 35, 40. So martial arts is for everybody. I can't emphasize that enough. It's for anybody, any gender, any age. Whenever you want to really start it, that's the perfect time. And that defines your journey. Because when you look back at UFC fighters or their backgrounds, you'll see that they all started at such different times. Some of them had backgrounds, some of them did not have backgrounds. So if there's young kids who really want to start it, you can do it. There's nothing stopping you.
Now, from your experience, how strong is India's coaching and gym ecosystem for someone who's starting their MMA?
In India, I would say we have a really good ecosystem of the individual sports and
Mm.
the sport around it because we have been doing wrestling and, boxing for ages and ages. So we have coaches who are really proficient in it. But from my experience and from my point of view, when it comes to MMA, most of the coaches, not a lot of coaches really are proficient in just MMA. They might be really have dedicated their entire life to one sport and now they want to teach that. But
Right.
then there's many, many coaches who really took that step forward and just did it and really prepped themselves, learned themselves to really teach the generation instead of being like, okay, it seems like an interesting sport. Let me just teach it now.
Mm.
Right. So I really commend those coaches when I was in Chandigarh, when I had my coach from Colombia. When I talk about Anshul Jubli's coach Sid, Coach Siddharth, I know he has a holistic view to MMA as well. But if I tell you, is India packed with great MMA coaches? I can't say that because we're still a growing sport.
Mm.
We are still on the pathway of really having that recognition of MMA in India. And
Right.
it has to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And that was the main reason why kind of like I wanted to come to the United States and have that education because it has been here for way longer time.
Are there any names that you'd like to share of ones? I think you mentioned one or two, but for someone who's watching the show and is keen to start, any well-known coaches or gyms who are doing well in the space of MMA?
Say I have a bunch with IMMAF. You can definitely find coaches in different states in Chhattisgarh or in Tamil Nadu or in Mumbai. You can definitely get in touch with IMMAF and you want to find that. In Chandigarh, I know we had Suraj Kabir Verma who taught in Kings MMA. And then we're having a new gym come up. I know there's going to be a new gym that's being done in Mohali, which is going to be taught by Priya Sharma, who has had a really great career as well. Anshul Jubli's coach, Siddharth in New Delhi, I've heard great things about him. So these are the major names on top of my head. And if you're in some other state and you don't know who to find, you can always reach out to these people, and find someone around you in your state as well.
Right. And so I wanted to ask you about how financially demanding is the journey to become a competitive MMA athlete. I mean, of course, you spoke about when you have access to resources the way you have, then I think some of those questions get answered. But if you don't, if you're, let's say, you were in India, what is the kind of financial demand that the arts put on you?
I would say if you are really passionate, you find a way to work with whatever you have. Like I've trained with just having like truck tires and having an Indian mace and just having the old traditional weights or using bricks or stones and training in that way, which doesn't take that much money. And then I've trained in gyms. Now here I'm fortunate to not having to pay because of CombatU. But I can really talk about when I was using really minimal resources in India when I was training and just using these traditional kind of assets that we have in India, like our gada that we have. I would use it a lot. And then you have your traditional diet. I cannot emphasize enough how healthy and powerful our Indian diet is, right? I was someone who would train and the first thing I want to eat is a churi or go have kura, right? So we really don't have to have all those big supplements or the protein or creatine and all of that to really be a fighter. You have to work in the parameters of your resources. So if you don't have those resources right now, doesn't mean that you cannot go forward in your journey. You just, use whatever you have as a tool to go forward. And along the way, you would get your answers to have more resources and having more support.
I mean, never say no. I love that about you, Aranjot. One other thing is that now you've trained with athletes from different countries. Do you notice a difference in the base strength and conditioning among athletes from other countries versus, say, in India?
I would say the main difference that I've seen is the technicality versus strength.
Uh-huh.
Is in India, in my training, it was basically more focused on the strength, more a lot of weight training and conditioning. And in terms of that, when I came to the United States, I was really amazed on how much emphasis is put on the technical development and the techniques of it. There's time where you're just working on techniques, you're just rolling, it's technical rolling. So it really taught me to pace myself and that I don't have to be on my 100% every time at a training, but I can really focus on different parts of training. So that's the main difference for me that I saw when I came here, that wow, today we're really slow paced and we're just focusing on one technique and how to get out of this and how to work on that.
Yeah. Another thing is that, like, at least in India right now, with talks of India wanting to host the Olympics in 2030, bigger tournaments always really get a lot of public attention. I think it's great news in that sense that MMA will make its debut in the Asian Games in 2026. How significant do you feel is that for, the legitimacy or the structure and support for MMA in countries like India?
I cannot wait when MMA is going to be an Olympic sport. I I really think it's going to be soon because the traction and our generation that's really being a part of it, it's really instrumental to really give the generation what they want. So with the Asian championship coming on, I'm really excited for India to really show that we are doing it. We have athletes who are working on this budding sport and really show the world that, hey, we are coming. Our time is coming, you know? So it's really great seeing that happen, starting from when I remember when I won my first trophy when I was 14. I took it to school and they were like, what sport is this? What is this sport, right? So now having those big talks of having martial arts in a university, having our Asian championship, and even the talks of in foreseeable future, hopefully having MMA in the Olympics, just gives us that hope that when we really go out and show that we know what we're doing, the pathways open up.
And what could we be doing as a country to really help the sport grow?
First, it starts from schools and institutions. That's the main thing, that's the main support that has really helped me to develop and really be out there is an institution. An public institution really helped build an entire program for MMA when the rest of the world is telling you, hey, it's not even an Olympic sport. So in India, what I would really love to see is the schools having more emphasis on sports, giving more resources to our athletes, those who really want to pursue it, and not just think of it as just a rec. Because there are students in schools who really want to make a professional career out of it. It's not the time where you can tell all the students, hey, you can just be a doctor or an engineer. There are students who want to pursue so many paths. I really hope we can have those conversations from early stages in schools or in the households or from the mentors that, hey, your opportunities are huge and there's no parameters on it.
Wonderful. And who are some of the legendary MMA coaches and gyms globally that young athletes should know about?
I would say every young athlete to come to Sac State, come and train with Uriah Faber. He's great. He's the UFC Hall of Famer. So come out and train with us. That's where you get the pilot program if you're a young athlete to pursue your education, because I am really going to emphasize on the importance of education. And then once you come out, there's so many. We have the AKA Academy in San Jose. If they want to go, I know there's Tiger Muay Thai in Thailand, and then we have gyms in Canada, or the American Kickboxing Academy that I talked about. Khabib and his team trains there whenever they come here for their camps, or the American Kickboxing Academy. So there's so many academies in whichever country you want to. And the US, I can speak about from the buzz and the hype of it because of UFC and the great names who have really made a career in MMA. You can find all of that here. And in India, of course, all the gyms that I talked about, look for your easiest or nearest gym. If you want to start with another martial art like boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, that's completely fine too. And that would be easier for you to find those gym in India. So just be on the lookout if you're coming to Sac State, if you're coming to the United States. I'm here to kind of like guide who really wants to come and have an education here. Yes.
Yeah. You also mentioned an injury somewhere, and I think that's really hard for any athlete, but I would imagine that in combat sports, it's even more of a reality that exists. Just speak a little about that. Like, how did that happen? How did you recover from that?
So my injuries, it's been a roller coaster with injuries, I would say. The first one that I had was a airline fracture to my nose. It was in the early stages of when I started. That really, it was a quick recovery. Then the injury that took some time off me was I had a disc bulge, so my lower back injury. It took about 5 to 6 months on and off. I would still keep on training on strength and the things I could do, so it would relapse if I would come back to training soon. That was a lot of mental strength that was needed to navigate it because it was my first big injury, right? And that's when you're like, "Oh my God, I'm training every day," and now you can't. At that time, I had the opportunity to go represent India in the Gamma World Championship, and I couldn't go because of my injury. So that was in the very early stages when I started. And then after that, I had an abdomen injury, which took many months, many months. So frustrating. But having my coaches during those times really just gave me other avenues to focus on, which was mental strength, more yoga, more strength work. So all those injuries really allowed me to grow as a person and really focus on other things. And in the United States last year, I had a concussion at training. So that also took a few months off my plate. But during that time, I would still stay active and focus on school. I was campaigning for elections to be the student body president at that time. And all I can look back and see is, along with training, they really came in as big learning points, right? I learned more about natural recovery, Ayurveda, because any injury that I had, I always recovered them with the help of Ayurveda.
I mean, in some of the other sports like strength conditioning or how you train also plays a role in injury prevention. Do you feel anything that you could have done differently in your training that would have helped, or it was just a
I
matter?
would say it's definitely the reason why I had most of my injuries was overtraining. So I would do all the strength and conditioning and have a really holistic view of doing all my strength work as well as technical work. What really led to most of them were not taking enough rest, pushing through when I should have listened to my body and just rested, taken that one extra day of rest. But when you're in the rhythm of it, you're like, no, I have to train, 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 train. And that mostly resulted into the wear and tear and not having enough recovery time between those little tears leading to a bigger injury. So if I would go back, I would remind myself more that, hey, it's okay to rest if your body really needs it.
Right, right. No, thanks for sharing that, because I think this is also something that applies across different sports that I think the athletes have to kind of look out for. So you played basketball, and here I want to speak a little about like just movement or physical literacy in early years. There can be different pathways. You could either be in any different sport that you're playing, or you could be practicing any of these martial arts. What, in your view, is the kind of sport participation that helps in early years?
My answer to that again is gonna be whatever one you want to try,
Hmm.
because you can't force a sport on someone. That's what I really feel. For
Yeah.
example, my mom wanted me to do lawn tennis when I was young, right? I was like, hey, mom, I'm going to basketball actually. So, because it came naturally to me and I picked my own sport, that really helped me. My path is different because my parents left it on me to pick and choose whatever I want to do. But then I also know some parents, they kind of like, if they're martial artists and themselves, they could start their kids early on and have them train, right? Which the main thing here for early stages is being active,
Hmm.
having your kid be in some sport, and then leaving it up to them which sport they really want to pursue. Because again, sports is not something which I believe can be forced onto someone. If I were to really give someone any suggestion, is give that exposure to your
Hmm.
kids to see what really complements them, what
Hmm.
really excites them, what really brings them out of the bed to go and train. And then down the path, when you give them all these options, they can pick for themselves.
And what kind of strength should kids really be building before they even think of picking weights or doing full contact training?
So body is your best friend. Your body itself, how are you going to go and lift a weight and build strength when you can't even do a push-up? So in the early stages, having that mobility, that endurance, that mental stability, that mental strength comes from being in other sports, which can be running or basketball or swimming, or it could be badminton. Body movement and that strength really helps translate into it because you build a lot of flexibility when you're young and your body's really in that molding stage and can really prepare you for really start lifting weights. If I could go back, I would really start lifting weight slowly because when I started lifting weight, I was making so much progress because I was athletic and I was lifting a lot of weights, and that kind of sometimes really led to injuries, right? So I really hope I was pacing myself when I started doing weight training. So that's something that I would tell people who are young to really take your time in building that strength, because sometimes it feels like, oh my God, you're young, your recovery is really good, and you keep on going, and then that threshold is reached. So it's really important that when you start lifting weight, you're doing it around professionals, you're taking that support, you're doing that recovery, and making sure you have that guidance.
Right. And also, I want to ask Aranjot, so much almost controversy around like kids doing gym and what's the right age. You see a lot of very young kids actually lifting a lot of weight, and then you see these social media reels and they're being celebrated at a very young age. I mean, it's almost as if the earlier you do, like everything is a greater achievement. Is there a right age to go to the gym?
You're right. There's so many controversies. There's so many answers around it. But then I see in the United States where kids who are like 10 are lifting and are really lifting a lot and are perfectly fine. But then there are some stereotypes when I look at some of the sides in India that it really, you might not grow, your height might not go up. I really think it comes down to recovery and having the perfect guidance. Whichever age it is, whenever someone's starting, the main reason why I would say someone to be cautious is to not really have a big injury early on. And that comes from the right guidance. So no matter whichever age you're starting, just make sure that you have the right people around you to guide you. Your form really matters. Your nutrition really matters. And if you're starting lifting from early age, that kind of holistic view of your well-being needs to start at that time too. There's a reason when you might kind of be looking at the downsides of lifting early is when you're not looking at the other aspects of being healthy.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important. Wonderful. So I think we've done a lot of heavy lifting kind of focus on MMA. I just want to do a quick fun rapid fire with you. So your go-to comfort food on a cheat day?
Cheesecake.
One, I mean, you said churi. I thought that was almost coming.
Churi, because I think of that as healthy. So curry chawal, rajma chawal, churi, all of them are going to be healthy. I would say cheesecake as a cheat meal. All the Indian food is healthy for me.
Okay. One MMA move you love landing.
Love landing neck chokes.
Okay. Desi habit that you still carry to American fight camps.
A desi habit. Oh, so whenever I get into the gym, you know how kind of like in Gurdwara we do, I don't know what we call matha tekna, right? Do that before getting into like on the mat.
Lovely. Reverence. We carry that wherever we go.
Everywhere.
One Bollywood song that instantly pumps you up before a fight.
It's gonna be Dangal. But I hear a lot of spiritual songs, you know, so I would hear to Shiv Tandav or Stotram, Aigiri, Nandini, or a lot of Sikh music. That's kind of like my go-to in terms of getting that pump before trainings or fights.
So we spoke about reverence and now we speak about being rooted. Lovely. One fighter from any era that you'd love to spar with just once.
Spar with Valentina Shevchenko. She's amazing. She's the everlasting champ. She just won her recent UFC fight too. So I would say her and Ronda Rousey too, because when I started MMA in the early times, I read her book. So she was really inspiring in the early stages.
Fantastic. Your guilty pleasure after a long day of training?
Eating chocolates. I'm a sweet tooth, so like calories from sweets for me don't count.
Okay, fantastic. One question that your parents always ask you before every fight.
Oh my God. They ask me so many questions. They just say, believe in God. Say, pray, believe in God, have faith. That's the thing they say all the time.
Lovely. One word that describes you inside the cage.
Deadly.
And one word that describes you outside the cage.
I would say I'm very jovial, happy, and just laughing all the time.
Lovely. So this was fantastic. I think so for people who don't want to catch the deadly side of it, they better see you outside the cage, is one would say. I wanted to speak about MMA and women. And as I was reflecting on it, usually in the past, it was all about the struggles that women have had and the resistance we've faced and the stereotypes and how this is male dominated. But I feel like I want to speak about something more refreshing in the sense that lately, if you think about it, like women's sports overall has been growing, seeing a lot of positive narrative. There's a lot more viewership. In an Indian context also, the Women's Cricket World Cup, the team just
Yes,
World Cup.
the team just won.
And also, if I think in context of combats, like all our Olympics, whether from boxing, wrestling, women and combat in India is now like near synonymous in that sense. How do you see the future of women in MMA?
Our first champion, our first winner for the UFC is a female, Pooja Tomar, right? So it's so refreshing to see that we're breaking those stereotypes. We're breaking those chains of patriarchy that in the past used to tell females that, hey, you don't have a career. All you are going to do is get married and go to a different home, right? It is so refreshing to see that those notions are changing, families are changing, and females are standing up for themselves and can tell the world that we know what we're doing and we can decide for ourselves. So that comes from females inspiring females, females standing up for each other and just having that generational change. And this generation being like, hey, it ends now.
Yeah.
So in the future, I see women in sports really rising and there's nothing that can stop us.
Yeah. In fact, there was this very nice statement I was trying to look up. I think one of your peers, maybe Sabrina Kuna at CombatU, something interesting caught my eye where she says that women in wrestling kind of saved wrestling, that it was very much dying until girls started wrestling in high school. Can you speak a little about that?
Even in CombatU, see our first to Sabrina Kuna, she's a national champion last year. She's one of the first national champions in wrestling. So these two females were the first two national champions. Our first All-American is a female in CombatU. And then females are really making waves. It's refreshing to see females coming in and really lifting the sports up because it's refreshing. All in the past, we have seen it being dominated by men. And that's why she said that I refer to it that females are bringing that touch of, I would say, a new touch to it and really showing that we are here too. You have to really stop thinking about only men can do it. So it's refreshing in all sense because when MMA started, only men were doing it. And look at it now, right? Like females are making statements. So completely agree with what she said. We're just adding spice to MMA in general.
And if you could also share a few female fighters that stand out as a powerful role model for young girls, that would be great.
We have so many fighters. We have a Yan from our own academy. We have Claudia McKenna. And then we have Joker in the UFC. She trains at Ultimate Fitness as well. And then we have from my gym, we have Marita Sanchez. And then we have Killjoy, who's making waves in the MMA scene here in the United States. And then we have Breestick in my gym, who has been world champion so many times in jiu-jitsu. In UFC, as I talked about, Valentina Shevchenko. Then we have Kayla Harris, who's really rising up right now. So, so many female fighters to look up to. Pooja Tomar from India is making waves.
Fantastic. And you mentioned so many champions at your gym itself. What is it like to be among the best, to be training with the best?
It's inspiring every day. It's something like when I was in India, was being the only female on the mats, I was looking around and it'd be like, where can I potentially go in this journey? And I see those females who are really doing it every day, who are really going to the cage, who show up every day, who train no matter what. When they lose, it's not the end. It's just the learning curve from them, right? So all these fighters in my academy really inspire me to look up to them and the work ethic they have and being holistic. And many of them have their businesses that they're running alongside. My coach himself has so many businesses. I can't even keep count of how many businesses he runs. And my coach is doing a fight again next year in January in A1 Combat, his own kind of championship, he'll be competing again. So I see there's people for who MMA is not just like a sport, it's a lifestyle, which really inspires me to look at that in that way, that every choice you make, anything you are doing in or outside, really translates into the sport.
Fantastic. If you had to give one piece of advice to a 12 or a 16-year-old in India who dreams to become a professional MMA athlete, what would it be?
Would say that be in school, complete your education, and while you do that, work on your vision of being a fighter, right? So, my best advice is do that while you're completing your education and complete it because education is important. It's really important. It teaches you the way of life. So, you can be an MMA fighter, but you also need the education to what if you want to have a business alongside and really complement your training or have that funding or create something big for yourself, right? So do that. And at the end, again, you can always come to CombatU.
One last question. Now, you've carved out really your own path in a sport where there was actually no roadmap that existed. What is your big message for young girls and boys in India to take away from your journey, or girls and boys anywhere in the world to take away from your journey?
I would say there would be more people who would tell you no than you would get a yes. So when you do that, just tell them, don't give me a no, give me a pathway to a yes. If you give up at the first no, you would never know what is after that no. So take that step forward and just have faith. And whatever you want to be, there's a way out for that. Just stick to the plan, be flexible in the ways you want to reach your goal, and the universe is going to help you achieve it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Aranjot. This has been such a brilliant chat, and I'm sure will be so inspiring for so many young people who will be watching this. Thank you for being on Raising an Athlete.
Of course. Thank you for having me and all you do for the generation.
Thank you.